Which leads us to the brand new topic under discussion today. And Wendy, I'm going to be doing quite a bit of talking about the details, so why don't you introduce the topic?
Okay, sure. So it's bad enough being hounded relentlessly by debt collectors for a debt you do actually legitimately owe. But when you don't owe the money, either because you've already paid it, which happens, or it is prescribed, meaning you don't legally have to pay it anymore, and we'll get onto what that entails a bit later. Or, as in your case, Pippa, it was never your debt in the first place. You can imagine the irritation factor is massive, and you don't have to imagine Pippa, because it's your lived experience. As I discovered last week when we were sitting in these very chairs, chatting off air, you said that you'd been getting these several calls a day for over a week, or maybe even pushing two.
Coming on 2 weeks by then,
from a debt collection agency called SSDA regarding a debt which was actually incurred by a former domestic worker.
That's correct, yeah. So these calls started at right about the end of October, late October, Wendy, and it's, the first one came through. I didn't think anything of it. The call said, I'm looking for Mrs. X, and I said, look, I know who that is, but this is not her number, and this has never been her number, so please update your records. They didn't say who they were, what they were phoning about, who they were phoning from, anything like that.
You
it was
thought
as simple
that was
as
the end of that?
I thought that was the end of that. And then it began relentlessly every single day, at least once a day, sometimes 2 or 3 times a day, from a rotating series of numbers. I couldn't just block. They were all similar. They were clearly coming from one sort of call center or switchboard, but I couldn't, every time I blocked one, another iteration came up a few hours later. And every time I answered them initially, I would go through the same process and saying, look, this is not her number. It's never been her number.
I am not her.
I am not her.
Never
I have no connection with her any longer. I haven't seen her in more than 7 years.
And more to the point, you've never had a contractual relationship with the company in question, or did they even tell you what the company was?
To this day, I don't know which company it was, Wendy. I don't know the nature of the debt, how big it was, who it was incurred with. It was just the same story over and over and over again. I told them every time, it's the wrong number. Please update your system. And some of them said, sure, we'll tell IT. Some of them just slammed the phone down on me at that point several times. But those calls just kept on and on and on and on coming. And eventually, after about nearly 2 weeks, I did manage to keep one person on the line long enough to say, look, please, can you send me a reference number of some kind for this account so that I can escalate this to the management of your company? Can you tell me who you are phoning from?
Yeah.
And she then said to me, okay, this is the name of the agency I'm phoning from. It is a debt collection agency, and this is the reference number for the account. And I sent off a mail. So I went onto the business's website, got their contact info, and sent off a mail saying, look, this is the story. Attached, please find the record of all of the phone calls I've received.
A lot of admin from your side.
It did take some time, but anyway, please will you update your records that this number is not attached to this account and never has been. And I got an auto response to that email saying we will respond within 48 business hours, which is a long time.
It is quite long.
But that didn't happen. It never has, Wendy. So no further communication from the business. And when it got to the point of 2 or 3 calls a day, I then went, okay, time to move on now, and take further steps. And so I remembered you once upon a time mentioning the Council for Debt Collectors. So I went onto their website. First thing I did was try and lodge a complaint on their online form. That wasn't working. You couldn't submit. You could fill in all the details, but when you hit submit, nothing happened. So then I tweeted them to say, hey, your website form is not working. Please let me know what alternative mechanism I can use. And to my amusement, Wendy, about half an hour ago, they've just replied,
I know,
probably 10 days later, to say, oh, please use an email address. And it is I by then had gone onto their website, found an email address.
Okay.
That, I have to say, is the magic formula. So that email address, I got a response straight away. It was within the day saying, attached, please find the complaints form. Just fill it out. You've got to get it signed off at a police station as an affidavit, fill it out and send it back to us. So so use the email address, very, very quick response. I started going through that form. Then the next red flag for me was there was a very big, bold thing saying, if your complaint is around disputing that the money is owed, we can't help you.
Okay, which cancels out all the scenarios I just read.
Yeah.
Prescribed.
All of that, yeah.
Yes.
So I went back to the person who'd initially contacted me and said, well, what do I do now? So who do I go to if you can't adjudicate this kind of dispute? And her response was, no, just carry on, fill out the form and submit it. And once I did that, Wendy, I was actually quite taken aback at how quickly it all worked.
Fantastic.
I think I went in to the police station on Thursday morning. I submitted the form on Thursday afternoon. On Friday, I was CC'd in on an email from the Debt Collectors Council to the firm saying, please find attached a complaint. You've got 5 working days to tell us.
I think it's just at 5 days.
5 days to tell us how you're going to respond. And the firm then replied
on the Monday.
On
this Monday.
The same day. No, the Friday
day.
as well, saying,
Okay.
we've received it. We'll make sure the customer's number is removed.
And?
Dare I touch wood? Is there wood in the studio? So far, so good. Wendy, I haven't had another call since then.
Did the trick.
It did work. As you said, it took a lot of admin. It took the hassle of having to go into a police station to get the affidavit signed. I still to this day haven't had any direct communication from the firm. So if you're looking for an apology or anything like that, forget about it. I don't care. What I wanted was for the phone calls to stop, and that did work. So long story short, Council for Debt Collectors complaints mechanism does work, but use the email address and be prepared for the fact that you will have to go and sign an affidavit. And it's quite an intimidating document because it sort of says, all information I vouch is there's sort of references to defamation and things like that. If anything is untrue, fair enough. You must fill it out accurately, and everything I supplied was
It's never defamation
true,
if it's true. But
it was quite disconcerting to read that.
Yes, quite sobering. But it is good to know that if one of our listeners or more of them, I suspect, are in a similar situation, that you've somehow had your cell number attached to someone else's debt and they're not stopping. They don't care how many times you tell them you've got the wrong person and they keep phoning. That this is something you can do. And thanks for navigating that for us, because now we know, just go to find the email address and do that. Don't worry about the form.
And the email, by the way, is info@cfdc.org.za, Council for Debt Collectors.
Yes, fantastic. Well, thank you. That was very
valuable
guinea pig advice there. So I did ask my contact at the council, what would motivate a debt collection firm to make several calls daily to a consumer over several weeks, each time being told that they have the wrong person? Why would they keep phoning? And I was told, apart from my question was, apart from the effect on the recipients, surely at some point it should become clear to them that they are back in the wrong horse and wasting their time and their call money. The response was, call center staff are supposed to make entries on the system. If not, as one person said that she would do, if not, the following are possibilities. The system does not allow entries. It's a very basic system that can only be accessed by a super user. Okay, or the super user is supposed to be informed of the caller and her problem and the merits investigated. That didn't happen.
Clearly didn't happen.
Or some debt collectors, business owners, may run up costs to the max that they can then add to their account.
So they're deliberately doing it, knowing that there's no point.
Because there's a certain amount you can charge per call according to the Debt Collectors Act. And so it could be thousands that's added on because
because they simply kept on calling a number, even though that is just so unethical, Wendy.
And if that happens, he says, as we've now ascertained through your experience, is to please file a complaint with the Council for Debt Collectors.
An interesting footnote to this, Wendy. He also mentioned to you that a lot of the work by these call centers the amount of work, the number of jobs that are made available is driven by the number of calls that are being made. So if an agent has to make a certain number of calls a day to reach their quota and keep their job.
Nail on head right there.
Yeah. That, hey, I've got to make 20 phone calls. And the fact that 19 of them are to numbers are not associated with the debt. You can log the call. I can still log them and make the call.
What a waste of time for everybody involved.
What a waste of money for the client as well.
Exactly. So, on the back of your experience, Pippa, and knowing that thousands of those pay up or else calls, you didn't really get to the or else, but you that could have happened. These calls are made every day. We thought that we'd get in touch with a debt collecting expert to share with listeners what their rights are when faced with such a call, whether they legitimately owe the money or not. Because even if you are legally required to pay a debt collectors do have to play by the rules, and sometimes they don't.
Wendy, before we introduce our guest, you wanted to share some interesting stats with us.
Oh, yes. Let me just get that up again. So I asked you to guess how many of the country's 26.5 million credit active consumers are classified as being in good standing. Mm-hmm. And it was more than you thought, according to the National Credit Regulators information for the quarter ending in June, so it could be slightly changed by now, but there was 62.7% with decent credit records, ones that wouldn't scare off a credit provider in any case, a landlord, an insurance company, or even an employer. Employers look at such things. So that means 37% of those 26 million people would struggle to get out, to even take out a cell phone contract. So it's in the minority, but it's still almost 10 million people,
Yeah.
and that's quite sobering.
Okay.
And so that's sort of some context for many of those people would be getting calls from debt collectors to say pay up because they've fallen behind in their repayments.
Yeah. Okay. So, and of course, to say it should go without saying, but we have to say nobody is suggesting that you shouldn't pay your debts, but
only legitimate
the point
ones.
is legitimate debts, and there are rules of engagement, as it were, that govern the way the industry is allowed to go about recovering them. Which brings us to our guest, Wendy.
Swiftly, yes. And a very high-powered guest in this arena. His name is Eugene Joubert, and he has been a consultant in the credit industry since 1973. He authored the Debt Collectors Act. He's done many inspections for the credit regulator, and he's just recently back from Dublin, where he hosted the 7th World Credit Congress. So I think it's fair to say that Eugene knows his stuff.
He is an expert in this field. Eugene, thank you so much for joining us on CapeTalk. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for your time, and I hope I can be of some assistance to you.
Thank you very much.
So, I don't know how much of that you listened to, but I did sort of brief you a bit off air. Were you listening?
I were listening. I would like to challenge you on one of your statements, if I might just
Oh,
start
goodness
off with
me.
that.
I'm on the naughty step. What did I say?
Yeah, you said 30% is in poor standing, the consumers.
Yes.
Because 62.7% is in good standing.
Was that not a fair takeout?
Okay, it's a word play.
Oh.
Good standing definition in the NCR, the National Credit Regulators records, means I'm no more than 3 months in arrears.
Oh, okay. So the problem is bigger than what I said.
Much bigger.
I see. Thank you for that. I learned something, that definition.
Yeah.
Okay. They didn't spell that out in the press release, but good to know.
No, they don't tell you that, but they regard an account that's not 90 days in arrears.
Okay,
in good standing.
So the percentage of people who are up to date and haven't fallen behind at all is much smaller than that 60-something percent.
Much
okay,
smaller
thank
than
you
that.
for that. That's really valuable information to know. So, could you shed some light on why Pippa had to get the Council for Debt Collectors to help her to get those calls to stop? She had explained over and over that her phone number had been given either in error or deliberately by a former employee, and that they were therefore phoning the wrong person, but that harassment over almost 2 weeks only stopped when the council took up her case. Why did what is behind that? We've thrown around several theories so far on the show, about one of them being that calls cost get added to the account. And also that the agents had to meet certain targets, and then they knowingly contacted someone having been told
It wasn't the right person.
It wasn't the right person, or perhaps the system reflecting that.
Okay. You're opening a can of worms here.
That's what I like to do.
in the industry, the credit industry, prior to the Code of Conduct being published on the credit bureaus, it was common knowledge that the bureaus would host the data from the credit provider, and if the debt collector wants to trace Wendy, then they would go to the credit bureau, say, I'm a debt collector, and buy your information, which would include references and neighbors and other telephone numbers. That practice has fortunately been stopped, but I must also add there's 32 credit bureaus in South Africa, and I think the ethical ones and that play by the book, they have all stopped. I'm not saying everybody has stopped, but that is one problem that's been addressed. So hopefully your number won't be sold together with somebody else's credit record anymore. But it still doesn't stop the credit provider providing the debt collector with your original credit application form, where you had to fill in your references and your neighbors, your dog's name and blah, blah, whole fish space, because they'd like to know where to get hold of you if you abscond.
Right.
So that information could still flow possibly from the credit provider, and I think it's also limited that it happens. So stopping the debt collector phoning what I call references or people that somehow could give me information as where to get hold of Wendy. I think the practice has not died down. We've just heard about this experience, but I think it's it'll slowly, dwindle and disappear, hopefully.
Okay.
Just in terms of your challenge that a debt collector agents must make, say, and I think you underestimated the normal quota is 80 calls a day.
Sure.
And you get charged for that. When I wrote the Debt Collectors Act, I was afraid that this is going to happen, that people chase calls for more than one reason. The one being, yes, I want to trace you. Secondly, is to make sure that I charge every call to your account. With that in mind, I brought in a rider into that. If you look at the Annexure B, which is the fees that the debt collector may charge, the word necessary
Yes, I
appears
know.
before each and every one of those items. It says necessary calls, necessary letters, necessary SMSs. And then in the Act itself, there's a rider that you can ask the debt collector for the account, and then you can take it to a taxing master. Now, a taxation master would be the normal clerk of the courts in the magistrate court, or the law society is also a taxing master of that account. So, yes, it's again SLEP, but if you don't like the account that you received, there were too many calls and all sorts of items that you don't understand, you may have that account taxed, just like you would have an attorney's account taxed if you're not happy with that. So please bear in mind there is a way of getting around excessive expenses and excessive calls on your account. Calls may not be made before 6 o'clock in the morning and after 9 o'clock in the evening. So the debt collector is just going to wake you up at 6 o'clock, and they're going to phone you on your last coffee 9 o'clock in the evening.
It's interesting because when the direct marketers, the ones that are phoning to tell you have an early you qualify for an upgrade on your cell phone, those sort of things. I think it's a smaller window. They can't phone on a weekday before 8 and after
Business
8
close,
o'clock.
yes.
No, I think they can go into 8 o'clock or 7 o'clock at night. Anyway, it's much smaller. The debt collectors can go
So
until
they get a
9.
bigger window. Okay.
Much bigger window, yeah.
But the direct marketers can also phone you on a Saturday between 8 and 12,
Yes.
I think.
Yes.
But not similar to the debt collectors. Debt collectors may not phone you on a Sunday. So what I didn't keep in mind is that Christmas might not fall on a Sunday.
Oh, no.
I should have been more clear in that than said public holidays and Sundays.
Well, it's not too late to amend it, Eugene.
It's not too late to amend it. So in terms of your data, now we're opening another side to this. If you, as a reference, or you're given, I gave Wendy's name up that she knows me, so if I abscond, phone her, she'll tell you where I am, and they get these harassment calls.
Yeah.
You've got nothing to do with Eugene, but people keep on phoning Wendy and say, pay up, or get Eugene to pay up, or tell me where he is, and you get this excessive harassment. We have to go back to the source of that. If we look at Papaya, where is the reference or the person's name that I gave up consent that I disclosed their name? So it's all about the consent. So if somebody phones you and say, well, we found your name on Eugene's records, please tell us where he is. The easiest thing for you to do is to refer them to the POPI regulator.
Okay.
Advocate Pansy is fairly on the ball, and if she gets enough of these complaints, the industry might not get a verdict that they're going to like. I know it's, if you take away that ability to phone other people to trace Wendy, the industry is going to suffer terribly, because they have to get in contact with you, and all they have is Wendy's telephone number, but they're not allowed to harass you. And my quick out of these calls would be to ask them, where did you get my information?
Yeah.
As people do, and they get told a lot of nonsense.
Yes.
Yeah.
Can I quickly slip in, and for those that might have a pen, just the email address for sending those complaints to the information regulator is Papia Complaints, Popia Complaints, one word, at inforegulator.org.za.
Inforegulator.org.za. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've made a note of that as well. So if anybody is driving and couldn't jot it down, you're welcome to mail me after the show. Eugene, I want to put another case study to you from a listener, Alan, who mailed us during the week with an interesting dilemma. He's also receiving, he said, I received an SMS a few weeks ago with a letter of demand from a firm of attorneys on behalf of a medical practice. On investigation, I was told that because of COVID and fewer staff and shortened working hours, etc., I had never been sent a bill or statement for the amount that I owed, and the amount was outstanding for 2 years already. I duly paid the account, but the firm of attorneys is now holding me liable for interest outstanding on the amount because it was outstanding for 2 years. And Alan's question is, how can I be held liable because it's the firm's lack of attention to detail in not the practice in not sending me an account in the first place? How can they hold me liable for not paying it? Is that a fair? I mean, he must have known he had a doctor's visit and that payment was due for it. But is it a fair point?
That's the crux of the thing. South African law says the debtor must seek his creditor, not the creditor must seek the debtor. So if you have debt outstanding there, it's your obligation to seek out your creditor. In this case, he would have had to phone them, the medical practice, and ask them what's the balance or how much does he owe them.
I think, sorry, Eugene, but in fairness, with medical issues, often it's complicated because of the medical scheme involved, and sometimes the patient thinks that the medical scheme has picked it up and they haven't. But I suppose, again, the onus would be on you as the member to check your medical scheme statements, and then you will see that the amount wasn't paid. But
unfortunately, something none of us do, or very few of us do. And then you get hit by this interest on the account that I paid late.
Yeah.
So is it legally recoverable by that attorney? Yes, it's legally recoverable. If it was beyond 3 years, we're talking a different story because the prescription might have...
I'm so glad you mentioned that, Eugene. I think it's always important to revisit this and remind listeners what that term means. When is a debt viewed as prescribed, and what does that actually mean?
Okay, let's just go back to the basics again. Prescription is only a defense in law. There's no automatic prescription. The Prescription Act states what is the prescription periods, but it's a defense for you in law. So if a debt collector or attorney or somebody wanting money from you, and you realize that this account might be prescribed, tell them to issue a summons. Tell the debt collector to tell the credit provider to issue a summons, and because I have a defense of prescription. I think 99% of the times you won't get that summons, but it's only the court can say, yes, this account falls within the Prescription Act's rules, and it is prescribed. So it is a defense. It's not automatic. If the credit provider, however, was a registered credit provider under the NCA Act, then it makes it a criminal offense to even try.
Thank you. I was going to get there. Yeah.
Attempt to collect. It's an offense. But then if the regulator charges me, let's say retailer X, your debt collector tried to collect prescribed debt from Eugene, and he's now lodged a complaint, then that will go to the consumer tribunal, and they've got the same standing as a court. They can decide if this account actually prescribed, and if it has, then there is serious repercussions for the credit provider. So the standard answer for the consumers is, if they think it's prescribed, tell the debt collector or tell the attorney that this account, in your opinion, is prescribed, and must please issue the summons so that I can go to court on that day and tell the magistrate or whoever is the hearing officer this account is prescribed.
We're running short of time, as we always do in this show, Eugene. I just want to sneak in one last question, and that is, if I get a call from a debt collector, whether I feel that I legitimately owe this money or not, do I have the right to say, I don't want to deal with you over the phone on this, I want to have my own record of our interactions, please send me an email, state how you have arrived at the amount that you're now demanding of me, etc. Do I have the right to say that? In my view, I do, but you, the expert, you might contradict me.
You'll see that the latest applications for credit has also got tick boxes. How do you communicate with me? So that's happening now, but it's not I think it's about 3-4 years in the making, that the bigger retailers and banks actually put in that tick box and say, you communicate with me, email, cell phone, or postal or whatever. But yes, you can direct the debt collector to communicate with you on your choice of communication. And you've got 11 languages in South Africa, 12 now with finger language. Tell them to communicate in finger language to you.
Eugene Jabir, thank you. That's fascinating information, and really appreciate your joining us this afternoon.
Thank you, Eugene.
And Wendy, thank you for finding such a true expert of a guest. Eugene, one of the authors of the Debt Collectors Act. You don't get more to source than that. Appreciate it. And Eugene, all the best to you.
Lunch with Pippa Hudson
on CapeTalk.